We're going to spend just a few minutes exploring Global Mapper's online data tools, so the ability to stream data from a remote location. Now that can be accessed in a couple of ways. Right on the introductory screen, you'll notice a online sources button here. I'll just move my cursor over so you can see where I am. This will allow you to stream data without any geographic reference, obviously. So it will stream the full extent of whatever service that you have selected. Perhaps a more meaningful way of initiating this process is to have some data loaded. So you want additional information perhaps for your project extent, and obviously we'll have some data displayed on screen that will define what that extent is. So to simulate that process, we're going to load up the workspace that we saved in the introductory section to this lesson. If you go to the File menu and you go to Load Workspace, it will remember where you previously saved a workspace, and you can see mine noted right here, Black Mountain. I will go ahead and select it and click Open. And if you recall, in our previous introduction, we had loaded a few layers. They're now displayed on my screen. I'll just zoom in a little closer here so we can see the results of what we're about to initiate. Now, we obviously have a lot of data here already. We've got vector data, we've got raster data. What I want to do in this kind of introduction to online data is to add an additional raster layer to allow us to see this more clearly. I'm going to turn off a few of the existing layers. So over here on the control center, you'll see checkboxes next to the layers that we have loaded. I'm going to uncheck the imagery. I'm going to uncheck the topo map, and I'll also uncheck the terrain. In other words, I'm isolating just the vector layer that we loaded, that being the parcels or properties layer. This will give us a visual context for the data that we will load in from our stream service. Now, given that we have loaded data, we're no longer seeing that introductory screen. We no longer have access to that button that was previously displayed. So we can access the online data services in a couple of other locations. From the File menu, you'll see an option here to download online imagery right here in the File menu itself. The other option is to click the corresponding button in the toolbar. Again, it looks like a globe, connect to online data. When you select this option, it pops up a dialog box, and obviously it's remembered one of the previous instances where I used this. It's remembered the service, but you'll see at the top of the dialog box a list of data categories. Now these are organized by type, and they're also organized geographically, and there is a little bit of overlap there. The lists you see here, the categories you see here, are not mutually exclusive. For example, if I click the imagery section, you'll see a number of imagery sources that we can connect to, including the USGS NAIP imagery. Those of us in the US can access this high quality imagery as a background perhaps for your project. That data is also accessible under US data. So again, you will find the available options in multiple locations within this service. Now, I'm not going to spend the time to go through all of these, obviously. This is just a brief introduction. I do encourage you in your own time to explore some of these options. In the description right down below, we'll describe a few more options that you might want to take a look at. But in your own time, as part of the learning process, I do encourage you to spend some time looking at some of these other services that are available. It's a very extensive library. Also, I want to note that you can add your own service. You'll notice a button right here where my cursor is located. If a particular service is available to you locally, maybe your local jurisdiction hosts a service, a web map service, for instance, you can add that. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can add that as your own service and supplement what's available within Global Mapper. At the bottom of this dialog box, there are a number of options for constraining the geographic extent of what will be loaded. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this right now, but feel free, if you think it's relevant for your workflow, to maybe define a subset of your data for streaming, or a subset of your geographic area for streaming. Perhaps a polygon that corresponds with the extent of a project that you're working on. You can then select that polygon prior to initiating this process and limit the extent of what's being streamed. Obviously, you're not going to waste time and resources rendering data that's not going to be useful. There are a number of ways of constraining that. The current screen bounds is the default, and I'm going to leave that selection as we select our data as our example. Now, the example that I'm going to use for our map is under the worldwide data section. So navigating through this select data source list, locate worldwide data, and go ahead and select the plus sign. Again, these available options would be available globally. So we've got some terrain data that's available globally, some imagery that you can access at a global level. Also, you can see OpenStreetMap data. Now, if you're not familiar with the OpenStreetMap project, you'll see this is actually listed based on the URL. You can open your browser and find out a little bit more about OpenStreetMap, again, if it's not something you're familiar with. Suffice to say, the OpenStreetMap is a collaborative project to create basically a global data set with streets, points of interest, and various other data elements as well. We're going to see some of that in just a second. There are a couple of variations on this, as you'll see listed, just based on different visualizations. Also, there's vector versions of this available that allows you to essentially download the data. Just off my view here, you can see a vector download, which basically if you select this and click connect, it will open your browser and allow you to literally download a vector file based on the same data. What we're going to look at is a raster version of this data, just again to give us a little bit of a more meaningful backdrop to the data we're looking at, this property data behind the scenes. So again, without spending too much time going into the details here, I'm simply going to click connect. Hopefully everything will cooperate as far as the service is concerned. It looks like it has. You can now see an alternative background to my map data. I'm going to turn off the parcels temporarily now so we can see a little more clearly. And I will zoom in and out just a little. Feel free to navigate around on the map. This may take a few seconds to refresh depending on your internet speed, depending on how many people are using the service. You'll notice a little bit of lag occasionally. We are connecting to remote data now, similar to that buffering you maybe see when you're streaming a movie. Sometimes you'll see the same here. A few important housekeeping issues with this type of service. You are very much dependent on the continual availability of this connection, that being your local internet access, but also the availability of the service itself. And it's quite possible that a given service may be down for maintenance or may have reached its bandwidth extent, and you simply may not be able to access it. It is a workflow recommendation if you are working with some of this online data to export whatever you're interested in for a project and save that as a local file. We'll be dealing with exporting a little bit later in the course, but that might be the second step of this process. So again, quick introduction to online data, just one example here, but I do encourage you, having whetted your appetite with this example, to spend some time exploring this a little further. Now, just to bring this back into context, I'm going to turn my parcels on again. You can see the extent of the properties here. I will once again save the workspace. Now, the workspace that I'll save will retain not only the connection to the layers that I've loaded locally, but also a connection to the online data. So when I load it up again, this OpenStreetMap data will be contained within the workspace and will be displayed on my map. So I'll go ahead and save, and that is a quick introduction to online data.